Hello, I'm Kurt Lidke, Executive Director of Klamath Film, and you just watched Andante Moderato, a stunningly beautiful single-framed animated short in our Northern Shorts category. With us is the film's director, Zak Margolis. Zak, thank you so much for joining us.
It's so good to be here.
So you are no stranger to filmmaking and animation work, but I was really hoping this year that we would get a lot of interesting animation for the festival because of COVID, and it seemed like the one thing people could actually work on from home. And it seemed like we got lots of animation this year, which I'm very ecstatic about. But since you focus mostly on animation in your career path, has COVID impacted your filmmaking much, or since this is your niche, is it just kind of business as usual?
Good question. I guess it's business as usual. I mean, it's. I think it's impacted all of us in one way or another. In that, a lot of our, my work especially is very much. It's always about me, my emotional state, and and our observations of the world. And I think, this last, COVID just by itself, it is a sort of a feast of emotional observations, I guess. And so yeah, that finds its way into your work, one way or the other, right? In terms of the actual nuts and bolts of working, yeah, no, I sit in front of my desk all day before the pandemic, and then I do it again, during the pandemic, and then now I'm doing it now actually, during the sort of next phase of the pandemic, and I'll be doing it again afterwards. So
Right. Well, I did notice a few subtle nods to the pandemic thrown into the animation, but I really enjoyed this as a very different approach because essentially it's a moving single framed one shot as a film and is really beautiful as something to just kind of, I don't know if this was intentional, but the vibe that I got from it was a way to kind of relax from all of the stress and frustrations of the past year of COVID-19. Did you intend to make a film that was kind of like a breath of fresh air during these tough times, or did it just kind of come out that way? Or was this overall it sounds like maybe it was your commentary on life over the past year?
Yeah, I mean, the title, Andante Moderato, refers to, it's part of the sort of title of the music almost. It describes how the music should be played, and in this case, the music should be played moderately slowly, and it to me was kind of the perfect title for the film in both. I hesitate to say that I was going to make, for an effect on people, and more that I was trying to express some things. And, one of those things that I was trying to express was this slow movement to, I don't know, whatever's next. I mean, at its heart, it's a film about observations, but it's also about just this kind of slow motion. And I think the if it was relaxing in any way or meditative, I guess that's a bonus. But it wasn't really what was on my mind when I made it.
So how did you go about making this? Was it initially a photograph that you rotoscoped? Was it hand drawn? Was it computer drawn? Because you start with just that individual frame and then slowly move in, and then there's all sorts of hand drawn things kind of going all around it. But at the heart of it remains that one window frame. So did that start with just a photograph, or was it really created by you?
So it's this everything you see in the movie. Every image is generated by a computer. You'll notice, however, the more astute people in the audience will recognize the wallpaper behind me now, as being a prominent character in the film. So it very much based on my immediate surroundings, immediately based on what some of the things that literally did go on outside my window. But everything was generated inside of a computer.
Interesting, because it looks very lifelike, the initial frame and the way that you move in on it, and then all of the buildings. It looks like you utilized a real life image or something to somehow incorporate into it. So very well done in that respect.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
The selection of a classical Florence Price composition is interesting. For me, actually, that was maybe that's what made me go back to COVID, because my personal experience in COVID has been that I've been doing tons and tons of live streaming. And in fact, the theater where we are holding our festival has been active throughout COVID. And last, I guess a little over a year ago, we did a classical concert that incorporated Florence Price's story, her whole backstory, some of her remarkable works. And it was a whole multimedia concert experience with videos that I created about Florence Price, incorporated it into the concert.
That's so cool.
So it was kind of a nice throwback to me of how I survived the pandemic, because I did a whole bunch of stuff regarding Florence Price. So the music, it's my understanding, was recorded specific for this film. So how did you go about doing that with all of the COVID restrictions?
The 45th Parallel, the arts organization that sort of came up with the whole notion of this project and who worked with me, they did 52 shows, live stream shows over the course of the pandemic. Every Friday, I'm not even sure how they did it, but one of the key people in here is Danny Rosenberg, who somehow developed a platform that allowed them to play music over Zoom. So they were able to play from their homes. Eventually, by the time this piece came around, they were performing in a big space together. So they performed together with mics, but just in a large space, different corners of a big room, basically. And they all filmed themselves performing, and they were all masked up with their classical instruments. And I mean, that's how they did it. And then I basically was working with other pre-recorded versions of the music before they finally gave me the final piece, and I kind of tried to sync everything, conform all the visuals I'd worked on to their more precisely to their version of, because it had slightly different timing. It's an interesting piece of music. It's one of those pieces that my first listening to it was very different than my 50th listening to it, and as doing animation and working with a piece of music like this, it's my job is to very much support the music and work to the music as sort of a base, and then move it from there. And it's so really as a filmmaker or animator, I'm just listening to it on loop. And what first seemed like kind of to me these overly sweet notes and musical pieces soon really became caused me to weep upon listening to this just over and over again, and making it become a part of me, and in order to turn it into images. I mean, a lot of the images you saw, I had ideas for it, but it really is the music itself that sort of I tried to let be the voice in the images that I made.
Okay. So timeline, how long did this take to create? Were you steadily working on it, or was this like I'll dabble on it today and then maybe I'll come back in a couple of days and work on a little bit more? And
so there wasn't much of there wasn't much time to work for this particular piece. It was a very very tight deadline. In fact, the initial deadline was about 2 weeks, and they ended up pushing it back another couple weeks. It was, all in all, this whole thing took about a month, but many hours,
Right.
lots of night times and early mornings working. It was very nonstop.
Well, animation is such a slow, tedious process to begin with, and I know computers have helped to expedite that process some, but there's still a lot of time dedicated going frame by frame by frame through everything. So I I I am always in awe of people who work in animation, because I just don't have the patience to be able to to do that. So give us maybe just a brief overview of what it's like to spend an entire month working on a short animated film. Like what is the process behind it to create something
Mm.
that like this?
Mm. Yeah, so I alluded to sort of the initial process, which is very much just listening to the music on repeat and letting that inform some of the images. I mean, this is the kind of thing where it's like after a number of listens, the images do start appearing in your head, and there's a certain amount of craft involved in this. I mean, like you described, the hallway is fairly realistic, and so it takes a lot of elbow grease to get it to that level of there's a certain amount of building props, painting them, to getting my wallpaper to go in the hallway, getting a lot of it is setting up lights, and a lot of it is it's just like there are parallels to live filmmaking as well. It's figuring out what the pacing is going to be. I mean, since this film turned out to be very much about the experience of passing time, just figuring out the pacing and how it relates to the music and how it relates to the piece overall. So it's I don't think I just suggested that it's a little bit like regular filmmaking, but it's also a little bit like painting, and that you got to sort of see what's up on the canvas, and then you can sort of go on to the next thing, add some different colors. It's a little bit like making music too, because it's time based. It's and the way music flows, and we're also working with a piece of music. So it's like a lot of these other forms. It's there's a lot of craft involved and a lot of just elbow grease getting it into the right area, so it's hitting those right tones.
Yeah. Years ago, I worked on video games down in LA, and I got to see all of the animators working on the various cutscenes, and it was amazing how many layers go into, like we go see, a Pixar film or something, and they look incredible. Some of them look very lifelike, but you don't realize that's hundreds of people spending several years putting in the tiniest of details to make it look photograph realistic. It is a very, very long process to get to that point.
Yeah. It's a lot of what you do with computers. It's is fakery, and so if you're going to, sometimes you actually do have to build your props so that they look lifelike. But then there's also lots of various tricks you can do you sort of have to. Computers are, what's amazing about them is that someone like me can kind of sit in my, filthy office and, make, visual work like this kind of high production value work, right at home. It's actually affordable for independent artists like me. but yeah, they're not quite up to the level where it's like you still, it's, you know, this is where it's a lot like filmmaking. It's all fakery and tricks.
Yeah. The slow dolly into the window is just really beautiful, and to me it was very cathartic in watching it as kind of a reflection of you know, the times and COVID and everything else of like, here's a chance to kind of breathe and relax. But it's also showing the time lapse very slowly of kind of wilderness turning into a city landscape. What you talked about, like moderately slowly evolving from wilderness to urban. I have my own interpretations, but what do you hope that viewers take away from that slow timeline presented? To me, it oddly reminded me kind of an abstract way of the opening scenes of the Pixar film Up, in terms of like the timeline jumps. But what do you hope that people who watch this get out of it?
I don't know. I mean, I do hope that that people are able to connect with the images in some way, and I don't want to tell them how to do it exactly. I certainly, like, to me, this is an autobiographical film, but I think there are some things in there that I hope people see as sort of a shared experience to an extent.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, thank you, Zach, so much for your film, for this incredible work, and for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Andante Moderato will be screened on Sunday, September 19th at 11:45 a.m. in our Northern Shorts category, and available all week on demand. Thank you so much, Zach. It was great talking to you.
Thank you.